In the spring of 1972, on a Saturday morning at a farm equipment auction in Greene County, Kansas, a 23-year-old farmer named Ethan Cole made what everyone there agreed was the dumbest purchase of the day. He paid $90 for a tractor that hadn't run in nearly 15 years. It sat at the far edge of the lot, away from the good equipment, like something people preferred not to stand too close to. The paint had faded to a dull gray. The tires were cracked and sinking. Birds had built nests inside the air intake, and someone had scratched the word "scrap" into the side panel. No one disagreed with that description. The auctioneer barely gave it attention. "All right, folks, last item of the day. 1960 Oliver 550, selling as is. Probably good for parts, maybe. Do I hear 50? Silence. A few chuckles from the crowd. Come on now, $50 for history? Nothing. The auctioneer was about to move on when Ethan raised his hand. 50. The auctioneer looked up. I have 50. Do I hear 60? Nothing. 50 going once, 50 going twice. 90. Ethan again, bidding against himself. That's when the crowd really started laughing. Out loud. Who bids against themselves for junk? Sold. The auctioneer said it quickly, before Ethan could raise it again. To the young man in the back, "Son, you just bought yourself either an antique or a boat anchor." More laughter. Ethan didn't respond. He walked to the payment table, counted out $90 in small, worn bills, almost everything he had, and took his receipt. That's when Harold Jensen found him. Harold was the biggest equipment dealer in the area. Clean shirt, polished boots, always smelling like aftershave and new rubber, and always having something to say. "Ethan, I heard you just spent $90 on that pile of scrap." "Yes, sir." "Do you know what $90 could have gotten you?" Harold pointed toward the parking lot. "That's a down payment on a real machine, something that actually runs." Ethan looked at him. "I can fix it." Harold laughed. A loud, easy laugh, the kind meant to be heard. "Fix it? Son, that tractor hasn't run since the early 60s. The engine's probably locked solid. The transmission's full of mice. You'd need $1,000 just to make it cough." Ethan didn't raise his voice. "I can fix it." Harold stepped closer, lowered his voice, but not his tone. "Listen, you're young. You've got 70 acres of sandy ground, and you just spent most of your money on something that isn't worth half of it. That's not farming. That's throwing your future away." Ethan looked at him for a moment, then said, "My father taught me something. The worst thing a man can do is let other people decide what's possible." Then he walked past him, back toward the tractor, leaving Harold Jensen standing there in silence. Behind him, the laughter spread again, across the auction yard, and for a while, that was the story. The kid who spent $90 on something everyone else knew was worthless. To understand why Ethan Cole bought that tractor, you have to understand what he didn't have. Because that $90 wasn't extra. It wasn't spare money. It was everything. Ethan was 23 years old in 1972, the only son of a man named Robert Cole. His father had farmed 70 acres along the edge of the Cottonwood River. Not rich land. Sandy, unpredictable. The kind of ground that worked against you as often as it worked for you. But Robert Cole made it work, not by spending money, but by fixing things. Everything. Engines, implements, pumps, anything that broke, he repaired himself. Ethan grew up in that workshop. Before he ever drove a tractor, he learned how to take one apart. Before he ever planted a field, he learned how to rebuild an engine. By 16, there wasn't a machine on that farm he didn't understand. And then, in the fall of 1971, everything changed. His father died. Sudden. A heart attack out in the field. Ethan found him. And just like that, he wasn't learning anymore. He was responsible for the land, for his mother, for everything his father had been holding together. And that's when he found out something else. Something his father had never talked about. Debt. Small pieces of it spread everywhere. Seed, repairs, equipment. Nothing overwhelming on its own, but together, heavy. And the farm only had one working tractor, an older machine, already worn down, already close to failing. That winter, it finally did. The engine gave out completely, and Ethan didn't have the money to replace it, not even close. For a year, he worked around it, borrowed equipment, rented when he had to, fell behind, one season at a time. Because without a tractor, you're not farming. You're chasing time and losing it. He looked at newer machines, even used ones, but everything cost more than he could afford. And everything came with something else: payments, interest, obligation, the kind his father had always avoided. So Ethan made a decision, quietly, without telling anyone. He wasn't going to borrow. Not yet. Not if there was another way. That's why he went to the auction. Not to find something perfect. Not to find something easy, but to find something he could afford. And more importantly, something he could fix. Because that was the one thing he knew how to do. He didn't know what shape the machine would be in. He didn't know how long it would take. He didn't know if it would even work. But he knew this: if it could be taken apart, it could be rebuilt. That's what his father had taught him. Not with words, but with years of work in a cold workshop, fixing things nobody else thought were worth saving. So when Ethan stood in that auction yard and looked at that tractor, he didn't see scrap. He saw time, work, a problem he understood, and something else that no one else there was willing to give it: a chance. What he didn't know was that inside that machine there was more than rust, much more. But that part of the story was still years away. First, he had to get it running. The hardest part wasn't buying the tractor. It was bringing it back. Ethan borrowed a flatbed trailer from a neighbor who hesitated before saying yes. Not because of the tractor, but because of Ethan. People were already talking. It took 4 men just to get it onto the trailer. The wheels wouldn't turn. The steering was locked, and every inch of it resisted, like it didn't want to move again. When they finally dragged it into his barn, the truth became clear. It was worse than it looked. The engine seized solid, not just stuck, frozen. Years of sitting had turned oil into varnish. Rust had bonded metal to metal. The pistons weren't moving, and they weren't going to without a fight. The transmission, full of nests, dry, corroded. The wiring, brittle and crumbling. The hydraulics, dead. That first night, Ethan didn't touch a tool. He just stood there, looking at it, wondering if everyone else had been right. Then he remembered something. Something his father used to say. Every broken machine is just a puzzle. You just have to find the first piece. So that's what he did. He chose the engine. Now, most people don't understand what it means to rebuild a seized engine. You don't fix it. You take it apart completely. Every bolt, every bearing, every surface. And you don't just clean it, you decide what can be saved and what's already gone. Ethan had no shop, no equipment, no training. What he had was time and stubbornness. He went to the library, pulled every manual he could find. Engine repair, machining, farm equipment guides. At night, he studied. During the day, he worked fields, using borrowed machines. And every spare hour, he came back to the barn. Slowly, he began taking the engine apart, bolt by bolt, piece by piece. The first piston took him 2 days to remove. It wouldn't budge, not with force, not with heat, not with anything he tried, until he stopped forcing it and started understanding it. He soaked it, waited, tapped, not hard, just enough, and eventually it moved. That's how the whole engine went. Not fast, not easy, but forward. Outside, the county kept talking. At the diner, at the feed store, at church. That tractor's never running. He's wasting his time. Kid should have taken a loan. Harold Jensen drove by once, slowed down, watched Ethan working, then shook his head and kept going. Ethan heard it all. He just didn't answer it, because the truth was, he didn't need them to believe. He just needed the machine to work. By the end of that first year, the engine was apart. Every piece laid out on the floor, organized, labeled. And that's when he noticed something strange. When he drained the oil, it wasn't what he expected. It was old, but not ruined, not completely. And more than that, there had been fresh oil added before the machine was stored. That didn't make sense. Neither did the oil pan. It had been sealed, not just bolted, but sealed tight, as if someone had gone out of their way to protect what was inside. Ethan noticed it, thought about it, and then kept working. Because whatever that meant, it wasn't the problem in front of him. The problem was getting the engine back together. And that was going to take everything he had. Time, skill, and more patience than anyone watching thought he had. It took him 3 years. 3 years of nights in the barn. Cold winters, long days, followed by longer evenings. 3 years of being told it wasn't worth it. But by the spring of 1975, Ethan Cole had something no one else in that county expected. A rebuilt engine. Not perfect, not factory clean, but precise, measured, assembled by hand with nothing but patience and understanding. He checked everything twice: oil, coolant, fuel lines, timing. Then he climbed into the seat, the original seat, cracked, worn, but still holding. His hand rested on the starter, and for a moment he didn't move, because this wasn't just a machine anymore. It was 3 years of doubt, of work, of proving something to himself. He pressed the button. The engine turned once, twice, then coughed. A rough sound, uneven, uncertain. Then again, and again, until finally it caught. The engine roared to life, not smooth at first, not quiet, but alive. Ethan sat there, hands still on the wheel, as the machine shook beneath him. And for the first time in years, he smiled. Then, without thinking, he drove it forward, out of the barn, into the sunlight. Dust rising behind him, engine settling into rhythm, sound steadying as oil moved through every part, bringing it back to something close to new. A few miles away, on the county road, Harold Jensen was driving past. He saw it, the tractor, moving. He slowed just slightly, watched for a moment, then drove on, without stopping, without saying anything, because some things don't need to be explained. From that point on, everything changed. Ethan didn't celebrate. He went back to work. That tractor became his farm. Every acre, every season ran through it. It wasn't easy. The machine was old. Parts wore out. Things broke. But now he knew how to fix it. And more importantly, he trusted it. Year by year, he stayed afloat, not ahead, not growing fast, but steady, while others started expanding, buying bigger equipment, taking on loans, chasing something bigger. Ethan stayed where he was, small, controlled, careful. And over time, that difference began to matter. Because machines can be replaced, land can be bought, Money can be borrowed, but understanding takes time. And Ethan had spent 3 years earning it. What he didn't know was that the most valuable part of that machine still hadn't been found. And when it was, it would change everything. For years, Ethan never questioned it. The sealed oil pan, the strange condition of the engine, the small details that didn't quite make sense, because he had something more important to focus on: keeping the farm alive. And for a long time, that was enough. Until the fall of 1986, 14 years after he bought the tractor. Ethan was doing what he always did, preparing the machine for winter, checking every system, replacing worn parts, making sure it would be ready for another season. That's when he saw it. A small crack running along the lower edge of the engine block. Barely visible, but real. He knew what it meant. It would spread. Eventually, it would fail. So he made a decision. For the first time, he would take the engine completely apart. Not just repair it, not just maintain it, but strip it down to the core. Piece by piece, he worked through it. Slower than before, more careful, because this machine was no longer just equipment, it was history. And then he found it. Something that didn't belong, a measurement slightly off, a space that shouldn't have been there. He stopped, looked again, measured twice. There was a hidden cavity inside the lower section of the engine, sealed deliberately. His hand slowed, not from uncertainty, but from instinct. Someone had done this on purpose. He cut through the seal, carefully, not knowing what he would find. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a small metal container, sealed tight, protected, waiting. Ethan opened it. Inside was money. Old bills, carefully stacked, preserved. He didn't count it right away. He just sat there, staring at it. Because that wasn't all. Beneath the money, there was a folded document and a letter, handwritten, a name at the bottom, the original owner of the tractor. Ethan read it once, then again. The story it told was simple and complicated. Years earlier, that man had come into money in a way he never felt right about. Not stolen, not exactly, but not earned either. And he couldn't keep it, but he couldn't return it. So he hid it. Somewhere no one would think to look. Inside the one thing he trusted the most, his tractor. He left instructions, not demands, not rules, just a choice. Whoever found it could decide what it meant. Ethan folded the letter, sat there in the quiet of the workshop, with more money in front of him than he had ever seen at one time. And for a moment, he didn't move, because the question wasn't what it was worth, it was what to do with it. The next week, he made his decision. He kept a part of it, not for comfort, not for luxury, but to secure the farm, to remove the pressure he had been carrying since the day his father died. The rest he used quietly, helping where he could, without explanation, without recognition, because some things aren't meant to be talked about. Years later, when he finally sold the tractor, it wasn't for the money. It wasn't for the value. It was because he understood something. The machine had already given him everything. The skill, the patience, the reputation, and the one thing no one else at that auction had: belief. Because in the end, the real value was never hidden inside the engine. It was in the decision to see something everyone else had already given up on and build it into something that worked. Most people walked past that tractor because they saw what it was. Ethan bought it because he saw what it could be. And that made all the difference.